It started as an ordinary Sunday afternoon, one of those rare quiet days when the world outside my small Ohio home seemed to slow down just enough for me to breathe. I had settled into my favorite recliner, a relic from my younger days, the leather cracked but still comfortable, with a steaming cup of black coffee on the side table and the Sunday paper unfolded across my lap. The soft light spilled through the blinds, casting long shadows across the living room, a room that had witnessed decades of family gatherings, holidays, and conversations both warm and bitter. I was looking forward to a peaceful afternoon after a busy week of volunteer work and catching up on a few old business contacts. Then Tyler, my grandson, wandered into the room. He was 17, a lanky kid with a mop of curly hair, and the sort of restless energy that comes with high school football and college dreams. Usually he would burst in with a joke or a question about the Browns or some new video game, but this time he was different. There was something in his eyes, unease, hesitation, maybe even a little fear. "Grandpa," he said, his voice low and hesitant, "I found something on my phone. I think you need to see it." His words hung in the air like a warning bell. I raised an eyebrow, gently setting my coffee aside and motioning for him to come closer. He handed me his phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he unlocked it. What I saw next would haunt me for years. The screen lit up with a group chat labeled Family Biz. At first glance, it seemed innocent enough, a name that suggested closeness, camaraderie, family business. But the words inside were anything but innocent. Brian and Lisa, my adult children, were there, along with a handful of their friends. As I scrolled through the messages, my stomach turned to ice. There they were, cruel, cutting messages, words that tore through my heart like shards of glass. "Cash cow," one called me. "Too dumb to notice," another said. They mocked me openly for my generosity, laughing about how easy it was to get me to send money or sign checks without question. I could almost hear the sneers in their typing. One message stood out. "Dad thinks he's helping, but really, he's just the family ATM." The realization hit me like a freight train. My children didn't see me as their father, their provider, their family. To them, I was nothing more than a resource, a bank with no limit, an endless supply to draw from. I sat there, my hands gripping the phone tightly as the words blurred before my eyes. My mind raced through years of memories, each time I'd bailed them out of tight spots, every emergency loan, every sacrifice I'd made to keep them afloat. I'd been proud to support them, to be their rock. But now that pride felt like a cruel joke. The chat revealed how deep the manipulation went. They'd joked about playing the old man, about hiding financial details, about convincing me to cover expenses while they splurged elsewhere. The more I read, the more it became clear. They had planned this exploitation carefully, taking advantage of my trust and kindness for years. Tyler watched me silently, his expression filled with guilt and worry. "Grandpa," he said softly, "I didn't want to find this, but I couldn't keep it from you. You deserve to know the truth." His words were a balm and a sting all at once. It was better to know than to live in blissful ignorance, but knowing this hurt more than I could say. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding, chest tight with a mixture of shock, anger, and a profound sadness. How could my own children speak about me this way? How could they lie, scheme, and mock me behind my back? For years I had believed in the sanctity of family, in unconditional love and respect. But those messages shattered that belief, leaving a gaping wound where trust used to live. I recalled the countless times I'd handed over checks without asking questions, convinced they were in genuine need. I thought I was doing the right thing, being a good father, supporting my family, but they saw it as weakness, an opportunity to take without giving back. The room felt colder as the reality settled in. I realized I'd been blinded by love and hope, unwilling to see the cracks that were right in front of me. I had trusted too much, given too freely, and now the truth was undeniable. "Grandpa," Tyler repeated gently, sensing my turmoil, "what are you going to do now?" I didn't have an answer. The ground beneath me felt shaky, and the path ahead was uncertain. But one thing was clear. I couldn't keep living like this. I had to protect myself. From now on, my kindness couldn't be a weapon against me. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't in years. Fear, yes, but also a spark of determination. I thanked Tyler quietly, telling him how much it meant that he'd shown me the truth, even when it was hard. That day marked the beginning of a journey I never wanted but couldn't avoid. A journey to reclaim my dignity, to build new boundaries, and to find out who I was beyond the role of cash cow. It was painful, yes, but it was necessary. And as I sat there, staring at that phone, I made a silent vow to never let anyone, not even my own flesh and blood, treat me that way again. The morning I decided to confront Brian and Lisa felt like walking into a storm I couldn't avoid. After the shock of seeing that group chat on Tyler's phone, my own children calling me a cash cow, mocking me behind my back, treating me like I was too dumb to notice how they bled me dry, the silence in my house was suffocating. I hadn't told anyone except Tyler, who had stumbled upon the chat by accident, and now it was time to face the reality I'd been avoiding for too long. I spent hours preparing in my head how I'd bring it up. Would they even admit it? Would they apologize? Or would I just dig a deeper hole for myself? I wasn't sure, but the weight of pretending everything was okay had become unbearable. I texted Lisa first, trying to keep the tone neutral. "Can we meet? Need to talk about something important." She replied quickly with a curt, "Fine." I then messaged Brian, who agreed but seemed hesitant. The diner was a small, out-of-the-way place, quiet enough for a serious talk, yet public enough to keep things civil. When I arrived, I sat in a corner booth, nervously twisting my wedding ring, waiting for them. I watched the door swing open, and there they were. Brian looked older than his age, with tired eyes that didn't meet mine, while Lisa's expression was guarded, lips pressed tight as she sat down opposite me. I started slowly, voice cracking despite my best efforts. "I saw the messages, the chat on Tyler's phone, the things you said about me, cash cow. Too dumb to notice. Is that how you really see me?" The silence that followed was heavy. Lisa was the first to break it, her voice cold and defensive. "Dad, you're taking things way too seriously. That chat was just jokes, family stuff. You know how we joke around." Brian nodded, adding, "Yeah, you've always been generous with us. We never wanted to hurt you." But I wasn't fooled. The words they said in that chat weren't jokes. They were cruel, deliberate, and the fact that they could casually write that behind my back showed how little respect they had. "Jokes don't cut this deep," I said firmly. "You've been treating me like a bank account, taking money without real need, lying about expenses, and mocking me like I'm stupid for believing you." Lisa's face hardened. "We've had our struggles, Dad. You weren't the only one responsible for money around here. You kept giving, so why blame us now?" Brian's tone grew sharper. "Maybe if you weren't so controlling, we wouldn't have to sneak around. You're not perfect, you know." I felt the sting of their words, half-truths and blame-shifting meant to confuse and deflect. But after years of bending over backward for them, I wasn't going to let them turn the tables now. I pulled out my phone and showed them bank statements, invoices, and messages where I had asked questions they never answered honestly. "Look at this, Lisa. You told me medical bills were piling up. It was all lies. You and Brian used that to keep getting money from me." Lisa looked away, biting her lip. Brian's face flushed with anger. "You had no right to dig through our stuff." "No right?" I said. "I had every right to know where my money was going, and now I know." They exchanged glances, half resentment, half guilt, but no apology. Instead, Lisa accused me again. "You enabled us. You chose to keep helping us even when you shouldn't have. Don't make us the villains." The room felt colder. The family I thought I had, the one built on trust and love, was crumbling into dust. I realized how deep the divide was, how many times I had ignored the signs because I wanted to believe they cared. Brian's voice dropped, bitter. "We're adults, Dad. We make our own choices. Maybe it's time you stopped trying to control us and accepted that." That cut through me. Not because I was trying to control them, but because they had no respect for me as a father. I was an ATM, a cash cow, nothing more. I swallowed the lump in my throat and looked at them both. "I've spent years supporting you, sacrificing my retirement, my peace of mind, and this is what I get? Lies and mockery?" Lisa's eyes flashed with anger. "You wanted to believe we were struggling, but we weren't. You just wanted to be the hero." "And now the hero is done," Brian said, standing abruptly. "Maybe you should think about why your own kids don't respect you." I wanted to shout, to tell them how wrong they were, but the fight drained out of me. I was exhausted, emotionally drained from carrying their burdens, and now this betrayal. As they walked out of the diner, I sat back, head in hands, feeling alone in a way I never had before. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about broken bonds, lost trust, and a family fractured beyond easy repair. Driving home, the silence in my car was deafening. I replayed every word, every expression, the anger, the defensiveness, the lies. They all echoed like a painful refrain. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the children I raised were strangers to me. How had things gone so wrong? Was it my fault? Had I missed signs, been too trusting? But deep down, I knew one thing clearly. I could no longer pretend that what they did was acceptable. The truth was ugly, but it was mine to face, and it was the first step toward healing. The days after my confrontation with the kids were some of the hardest I've faced. I was flooded with a whirlpool of emotions: anger, disbelief, hurt. But beneath it all was a cold, gnawing sense of betrayal that wouldn't let me rest. It wasn't just about their words in that group chat or the way they'd talked behind my back. It was the realization that I had been taken for granted, manipulated, and worst of all, that my own children had quietly put me in a financial cage without me fully knowing. I knew I had to get a handle on the situation, but I didn't know where to start. I wasn't the kind of man who dealt with finances on a day-to-day basis. That had always been my wife's thing before she passed, and later, my kids had stepped in, telling me it'd be easier that way. But now, I saw how dangerous it had been to hand over so much control without question. That Saturday morning, I cleared the kitchen table, an island covered in years of accumulated mail, bills, and folders I hadn't touched in ages. I pulled out my reading glasses, brewed a fresh cup of coffee, and sat down, determined to wade through the mess. First, I opened my checking account statements. I scanned line after line, eyes narrowing at payments labeled family support, household expenses, or worse, names I barely recognized. There were regular transfers to Lisa's account and Brian's, sometimes monthly, sometimes several times a week. It was like they'd created a steady pipeline to drain my funds without me ever really paying attention. Next, I pulled out credit card statements and investment account summaries. The more I looked, the more confused I got. Some of the charges were easy to recognize: utilities, groceries, my medical bills. But others were suspicious: withdrawals from ATMs in cities I'd never visited, recurring payments for insurance plans I never signed up for, automatic bill pay for accounts I didn't even know existed. That's when I realized something even more unsettling. There were joint accounts I'd agreed to years ago, mostly to simplify things, but I'd never checked on them since. In particular, a joint checking account with Lisa, which had been steadily drained over the past year, sometimes with overdraft fees I had been paying for. And Brian had a credit card linked to my primary account, maxed out with charges for dinners, electronics, and what looked like some online gambling sites. I hadn't been aware of any of this. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. How long had this been going on? How could I have missed it all? The trust I'd placed in my own children, the man who thought he knew his family, suddenly felt like a fool. That afternoon, I called up George. He was an old friend from my business days, sharp as a tack, and now working part-time as a financial advisor. I needed someone objective to help me make sense of the chaos. I told him everything: the group chat, the confrontation, and my discovery of the financial mess. George listened quietly, and when I was done, he said, "John, you're looking at a financial audit, plain and simple. You need to treat this like you would any business that's been mismanaged. It's not about family loyalty right now. It's about protecting what's yours." His bluntness was exactly what I needed. Over the next few days, we met several times, poring over every statement, account, and contract I had. George helped me identify every joint account, every automatic payment, and every place my kids had set up access to my funds. He pointed out ways they'd used my trust against me, like setting up accounts with vague names or scheduling payments during times I was away on trips, so I wouldn't notice. The more I learned, the more I felt a mix of shame and anger. Shame because I'd been so blind, and anger because those I loved had taken advantage of me in ways I never imagined. One evening, sitting in my living room, I took a deep breath and admitted to myself that this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, respect, and dignity. I realized I had to redefine my role in this family. For decades, I'd been the provider, the one who always stepped up to help, to give, to solve problems. But that role had become a prison, keeping me chained to their manipulation. That realization hit me hard. I wasn't just cutting financial ties, I was reclaiming my identity. The next morning, I met with Linda, my attorney. I explained the whole mess, showed her the documents, and laid out what I'd uncovered. She nodded in understanding and said, "John, what you're going through is more common than you think. Family or not, you have every right to protect yourself. Revoking power of attorney, closing joint accounts, changing beneficiaries, these are all necessary steps." She warned me about the emotional fallout. They'll push back, there will be guilt trips, accusations, maybe even threats. But you have to stay firm. This is about your well-being. Leaving her office, I felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. I had a plan, a clear path forward, but I also knew it would be painful. At home, I started drafting that plan in earnest. Closing the joint checking account with Lisa would be first. Next, canceling Brian's credit card and setting up alerts on all my accounts to catch any suspicious activity. I'd change all my passwords and security questions and set up a new system where only I had access. More than anything, I resolved to change how I saw myself. No longer would I be the cash cow or the fool who believed every story. I was a man deserving of respect and honesty, and it was time to act like it. That evening, as the sun set and cast long shadows across the living room, I sat quietly, feeling a flicker of hope. The road ahead would be tough, but I was ready. For the first time in a long time, I was taking back control of my life. After everything I'd uncovered, the secret chats, the joint accounts drained dry, the power of attorney abused, I knew I had to act. But acting meant more than just cutting off a few accounts. It meant dismantling years of misplaced trust and carefully untangling myself from the financial web my own children had spun around me. That realization hit me hard one evening when I sat down at my kitchen table, stacks of bank statements spread out like a battlefield map before me. The numbers were staggering. Small withdrawals here, unauthorized charges there, and a credit card balance that seemed to grow overnight. The quiet theft was relentless, like water slowly eroding stone. I felt a mix of disbelief and shame. How had I not seen this before? How had I let them convince me that they were just family needing a little help? But now, the mask was off. I wasn't the family's hero anymore. I was the cash cow, the word my grandson's phone had cruelly confirmed. And worse, I was complicit in my own exploitation because I hadn't been vigilant enough. The first step was clear. I needed to revoke the power of attorney I'd granted Lisa. At the time, it made sense. She was my eldest, and I trusted her to handle affairs when I was abroad or recovering from surgeries. But trust, I'd learned, was a double-edged sword. My friend Linda, a seasoned financial advisor, explained the process patiently over the phone. You'll want to fill out the revocation form and notify every institution where that power of attorney is on file, she said. Banks, insurance companies, even your doctor's office if she has access to your records. The paperwork was tedious but necessary. I spent the next few days drafting letters, making phone calls, and visiting banks. Each conversation felt like peeling back another layer of betrayal. A teller would ask why I wanted to close a joint account, and I'd give a vague answer, unwilling to spill family secrets to strangers, but determined not to let my children profit from my silence any longer. Linda also helped me identify other vulnerabilities. The joint checking account with Lisa, which I thought was convenient, was a liability. We calculated how much money I could safely transfer out to a new account, one in my sole name with a strict two-factor authentication setup. That new account would be my fortress, a place my children couldn't touch without my permission. Then came Brian's credit card nightmare. The balance was astronomical, and the bank confirmed it was linked to my main account. I called the bank to freeze it immediately, prepared to dispute charges I didn't recognize. Brian was livid when I told him. Our conversation was tense, laced with accusations and tears. "How could you do this to your own family, Dad?" he demanded. "I'm just trying to get by." "By running up debts on my dime?" I shot back. "You're not trying to get by. You're trying to take everything I've worked for." It was a painful exchange, but I refused to back down. This was no longer about being a good father. It was about survival. Another huge revelation was my insurance and investment policies. Several still listed my children as beneficiaries, meaning if I died tomorrow, the money would go straight into their pockets. Linda recommended changing the beneficiaries to a trusted friend, someone with no personal agenda. I hesitated for a moment, thinking about how that decision would be received, but then reminded myself this was about protecting what was rightfully mine. I couldn't keep handing over my legacy to people who saw me as a bank account. Beyond the big financial moves, I knew the little things mattered too. Passwords, security questions, online banking credentials, everything needed to be changed. I set up alerts for suspicious activity so I'd never be caught off guard again. For years, I'd taken comfort in the idea that my family had my back. Now, I was building a digital fortress to guard against them. One afternoon, I sat down with a fresh notebook and started writing my exit plan in detail. I wanted clear steps to follow, a checklist to make sure nothing fell through the cracks. The list grew longer by the day. Revoke power of attorney, close joint accounts, freeze credit cards, update beneficiaries, change passwords, alert banks. Writing it down made it feel real. I wasn't just imagining cutting ties. I was preparing to do it. Linda had warned me about the fallout. Your kids will push back, she said. Expect anger, guilt trips, and even tears. They'll try to make you feel selfish or like you're abandoning them. She was right. I braced myself for the emotional storm to come. But there was also a flicker of hope beneath it all. Hope that, once the dust settled, I'd finally be free to live on my terms. When I told my grandson about the plan, he surprised me. "Grandpa, it's about time," he said, his eyes steady. "You deserve to be respected, not used." Hearing that from him, the young man who had brought the truth to light, gave me strength I didn't know I had. That night, as the house grew quiet, I sat back in my chair and looked around my home, the place where so many memories were made, but also where so much trust was broken. I whispered to myself, it's time to take back control. For me. And with that, I knew I was ready to start the hardest chapter yet. As soon as I started closing accounts, canceling automatic transfers, and reclaiming control of my finances, I knew I was stirring up a hornet's nest. But I had no idea just how fierce and relentless the backlash would be. It was like the moment I pulled the plug on their access, I became public enemy number one in my own family. It started with the messages, text messages, emails, and even handwritten notes slipped under my door. At first they were subtle, almost gentle. Lisa, my eldest, texted me one evening, "Dad, why are you doing this? We're family. You're hurting us. Can't we talk this through?" It was a carefully crafted message designed to tug at the heartstrings. And for a split second, I felt that old familiar pang of guilt. But I didn't reply. Because deep down, I knew replying would just open the door to more manipulation. Then the calls began, sometimes several in a day. Brian, my middle son, sounded desperate over the phone. "Dad, I'm really struggling right now. The bills are piling up, and you're the only one I can turn to." His voice cracked, but I could hear the practiced edge of guilt in his words. I wanted to reach out and help, but I had to remind myself how many times I'd already bailed him out. "Brian," I said firmly, "I've helped you for years. It's time for you to stand on your own." That was the moment the tone changed. The calls became more frequent, more demanding. The texts turned into guilt trips, accusations, and ultimatums. "You're breaking up the family," Lisa wrote one night. "How could you do this to your own children?" Brian followed up with, "You're choosing money over us." The air in my house felt thick, like every message was a weight pressing down on my chest. It wasn't just the words. They were trying to make me doubt myself. Was I really being the bad guy here? Was I abandoning the people who mattered most? The doubt gnawed at me. But then I'd remember the messages my grandson showed me, the way they called me a cash cow and said I was too dumb to notice. That cut deeper than any guilt trip. Then came the face-to-face confrontations. One afternoon, Lisa showed up unannounced. I was sitting in my favorite chair when she walked through the door, tears streaming down her face, her voice shaky but fierce. "Dad, you're being so cruel. Mom's sick. We need help. Can't you just give us one more chance?" I looked at her, really looked at her, the woman who had hidden bank withdrawals from me, who joked behind my back about draining my retirement. My heart ached, but my voice was steady. "Lisa, I can't keep enabling this. This isn't punishment. This is protecting myself." Her face hardened. You're choosing money over family. No, I said. I'm choosing respect. I'm choosing not to be used. That night after she left, I sat alone and thought about the family I'd built, the sacrifices I'd made. I realized that what I was experiencing wasn't cruelty. It was self-preservation. Brian wasn't far behind in his own way. He sent emails accusing me of abandoning them in their time of need. I replied with cold facts. The joint accounts they drained, the loans they never repaid, the lies about their emergencies. They called me heartless, but I knew the truth. The emotional manipulation extended beyond my children. My cousin called, worried and trying to mediate. John, maybe you're being too harsh. Family sticks together. I appreciated the sentiment, but my experience told me otherwise. Family means love, but it also means boundaries, and love doesn't look like being exploited. One evening, after a particularly draining day filled with calls and texts, I sat down with my grandson, who had started all this by showing me that group chat. I vented to him about the guilt trips, the anger, and the exhaustion. He looked me in the eye and said, "Grandpa, you're doing the right thing. Sometimes people have to hit a wall before they can change, but you're not responsible for making them change." Those words gave me new strength. I wasn't just fighting for my money, I was fighting for my dignity and my peace of mind. The backlash didn't end overnight. The house sometimes felt eerily quiet without their constant demands, but the emotional weight remained heavy. Each call, each message, was a reminder of how deep the wounds ran. But, with every passing day, I grew stronger. I was no longer the family ATM. I was a man standing firm in his truth. I was learning to live with the fallout. The price of freedom wasn't cheap, but it was worth every moment. In the weeks and months that followed my decision to cut off my children financially, life took on a strange new rhythm. The shockwaves from the family fallout had left me feeling like I was walking through a thick fog, uncertain, raw, and more alone than I'd ever imagined I could be. For decades, my identity had been tied up in being the provider, the steady hand, the one who always had their back. To suddenly strip all that away left a hollow space inside me that no amount of solitude could fill. At first, I tried to lean on the few friends I still had, but many were distant, uncomfortable, or unsure how to react. Some offered half-hearted support, quickly moving on when my story became too complicated or too sad. I felt invisible in my own pain, as if I'd been cast aside along with the money. Then there was Danny, my grandson. That kid was a revelation. Danny had been the one to show me the group chat, the one who brought the betrayal out of the shadows and into the glaring light. And after that, something shifted between us. He came around more often, sometimes to mow the lawn, sometimes just to hang out. His presence was a kind of unexpected grace, a reminder that not all family ties were frayed or toxic. I remember one particular evening, we'd spent the afternoon fixing a squeaky door on the porch, the kind of simple task that's easy to put off but satisfying when done. Afterward, we sat on the steps, sipping sodas and watching the sunset paint the sky in streaks of orange and pink. "You know, Grandpa," Danny said, "I've been thinking. You don't have to do all this stuff for Mom and Dad anymore. You don't owe them anything." His voice was quiet but firm. I could tell he meant it. I looked at him, feeling the weight of those words. "I know, kid. It's just hard sometimes. Feels like I'm losing a part of myself." "You're not losing yourself. You're finding who you really are," he replied, eyes shining with the kind of clarity that only teenagers seem to have sometimes. "And you got me. I'm on your team." That simple declaration was like a lifeline thrown across the void. It wasn't just about money or betrayal anymore. It was about rebuilding trust and connection where it counted. Around that same time, I reconnected with Harold, an old college friend who now ran a modest but solid financial advising business. Harold and I hadn't spoken much in years, but when I reached out, he answered without hesitation. Over several late-night calls and in-person meetings, Harold patiently walked me through the mess my children had left behind. He uncovered joint accounts I'd forgotten about, automatic payments my kids had set up without fully explaining, and power of attorney documents I'd signed decades ago without understanding their implications. Each discovery was a gut punch, but with Harold's help, I started reclaiming control. He was tough but fair, never letting me off the hook when I tried to minimize what had happened, pushing me gently but firmly toward accountability. Then there was Marlene. I met her at a local veteran support group, an unexpected place for me, but one that quickly became a refuge. Marlene was a force of nature, with a razor-sharp wit and a heart as big as Texas. She shared stories of her own family struggles, betrayal, loss, and eventual healing. Talking to her reminded me that I wasn't alone, that others had faced worse and come out stronger. We'd meet for coffee, and she'd listen without judgment. Sometimes she'd call me out when I slipped into self-pity or anger, but always with kindness. "You're not a victim, John. You're a survivor," she'd say. And survivors build better futures. The combination of Danny's loyalty, Harold's practical help, and Marlene's emotional support began to weave a new safety net around me. It was a patchwork family, stitched together by choice, not blood or obligation. Even small moments of kindness from strangers helped. The grocery clerk who asked how I was doing and really wanted to hear the answer. The pastor who dropped by with a casserole and a listening ear. The neighbor who offered to mow my lawn when I was feeling overwhelmed. These tiny acts chipped away at the loneliness and reminded me that human connection is often found in the most unexpected places. All of this support didn't erase the sting of my children's betrayal, nor did it make the past disappear, but it gave me a new foundation. A foundation built on respect, honesty, and mutual care, things my own family had forgotten. More importantly, it helped me realize something fundamental. Family isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes it's who chooses to stand by your side when you finally choose to stand up for yourself. With Danny's steady presence and the support of these newfound friends, I began